Welcome to my podcast, Shaping Your Journey. My name is Aldo Matza, percussionist, drummer, and artistic director of Kosa Music, inviting you to join in conversation with friends, artists, professionals, and experts in our music world. And remember to subscribe so you may receive notices of new and upcoming episodes. Today, I have the great, and I mean great pleasure of having a great friend, longtime friend, um, percussionist, another one of us on the show. Thank you so much, Matt, for finally
Another one of
getting this
us.
together.
Nice to see you, Aldo. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, well, listen. Before we get on the topic of shaping your journey and all those decisions and that road trip, I know it's going to be a long one. Interesting though. Tell us just a little bit about the very beginning, the spark. What started it for you? Like when you were young, or whatever that was that got you going on this rail.
Well, I started off as a percussionist because I just felt like there was a groove, there was a beat, there was something when I was playing hand drums and I felt locked into a song or into somebody else's playing. It just was so inspirational to me. I'm sure you know exactly what I'm talking about. It's like I always say that it's like the air between the notes. When you can hear the air between the notes, and we're all using that same air in the same way, I just find that so exciting. And that led me on a path of many things. One of those things was becoming a band leader and forming Manteca, which is a way of hearing the air in between the notes with 9 other people at the same time, which is a pretty exciting moment. And then that led me into other things such as record production and show production and artistic direction. And it just became a constant kind of, um, challenge to kind of do something new and do something fresh using all the different little tidbits that I'd picked up in different worlds that I end up working in.
Right. And I know you were. I mean, someone like you. I mean, you're a TV producer. You're a documentary. I mean, we can go on and on. And that's really funny because I don't know if that's a percussionist thing that we just since our mind has to go in so many different directions and for so many different things to work, then that expands. We don't think outside the box. We invented the outside the box.
That's so true. That's a great way to put it too. I always say, that expression, if you want something done, hire a busy person to do it. If you want something done, get a percussionist to do it, because I've noticed the same thing. It's true. It's like, and I guess it sounds boastful, and I don't mean it to. It just means that I've come across a lot of percussionists who have ended up, doing a lot of different things in a lot of different mediums with a lot of different excitement, and a lot of leadership. And yeah, for sure, like on so many levels, we're the heartbeat of the music. And from that heartbeat, I think comes a kind of inspiration to do more, to go beyond, And I certainly, when I look at doing a project, what excites me about a project is having the opportunity to do so many things that I love doing. I love writing. I love, you know, design. I love the impact of sound design. I like the impact of music and how it relates to narration and how narration relates to lighting cues and pyrotechnics, and like that whole world is just always been so exciting to me. So I'm always looking for projects that incorporate so much of that stuff and as much of it as possible. And it has led me to some truly unbelievable experiences. And like I've been deeply honored to do some of the work that I've been hired to do.
Yeah, and that's interesting. I mean, sometimes it comes down to you can't make up your mind, so so you're gonna do it all anyway, and then some, and
Yeah.
then you just keep on going. Because I'm gonna ask you a question that people often ask me. They say, so 2 questions. One, when do you sleep, and how many? Where do you find the time?
Well, I sleep pretty not terribly restfully in the last few years, but I I I try and I try and organize my time as best as I can. I mean, I think that there are so many challenges. If you were to ask me, what is your state of mind these days? My state of mind these days is digitally exhausted. I am just so tired of platforms and
Oh boy.
digital this and digital that, and all of a sudden there's an update and nothing works anymore, and I'm just exhausted.
Sure.
And I find that there's also a digital exhaustion too, from the idea of like, you and I know this very well because a lot of our jobs were taken away when the drum machines were invented in the 1980s. I mean, we used to do sessions where we would be in
Yeah.
the studio for 8, 9 hours, doing one overdub after another and layering up tracks. And it could be a demo, it could be a commercial, it could be a film score, whatever it was. And those things were soon replaced by samples and drum samples, and so we're some of the early people who have suffered from what AI is bringing to our population. But the digital exhaustion that I'm talking about is basically also the idea that what we create has no monetary value any longer. And
Yeah.
as a result, the staff that you can work with, the teams that you can build to work on your projects, are minimized, and your dreams become more framed because you don't have as big a team. So I don't mean to be down and out about it, but I mean, definitely, I think there's not an artist around right now who isn't thinking about the impact of digital, both bad and good. And at the moment, I mean, you and I are speaking digitally right now.
Right.
Just to say, for example, if we were doing this 15 years ago, I would have to get into the car and drive over to your studio and blah, blah, blah. Now I don't have to do that now. And we can still have a great conversation. So there are many good things about digital. But at the same time, um, I podcast as well, and I'm on TikTok regularly. I'm embracing all of the platforms as much as possible, and doing quite well on them in terms of numbers. But there's no money there. There's no revenue being generated any longer, and I find that troublesome. And I find it also troublesome to discuss that with younger people because in a lot of cases they're saying, well, you just have to figure out how to use these platforms. And I'm saying, yeah, I'm not so sure I agree with you on that.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. I mean, you've said a lot, and if you think back now, Matt, when we were growing up, when we were young, the Beatles came up, right, and everything was 2 track and then 4 track, and then all of a sudden, and that's all you had to do or think about was the 4 track and the recording. It was that limitation and what they did with it later when they expanded it when the Sgt. Pepper album came out and like blew everybody's minds away and then suddenly expanded the channels. Well, I mean, you were there around the day. I mean, I used to do a regular TV show with 19 musicians live on CBC. 19 musicians, or going in the studio with everybody live, like Frank Sinatra used to do. And you do the session. Some you do overdubs, and I did a lot of drum set and percussion. And so I was like 3 different people during that
Hmm.
period.
Hmm.
And it was great running from studio to studio. I mean, it was on rollerblades almost. It was
And you were
great,
a master at it too. That's why you worked so much.
and it was fun because you see your friends and then you cross paths in the next session. Oh, that's the one he was at yesterday, and you continue the conversation. So the whole creative process was channeled there. And now, what you're talking about, all these channels. Now, I mean, it's not just channels. But it's like a universe that's just completely, it's not even 360. It's like a Milky Way.
Hmm.
That's the
That's
way
a
I
good
see it.
description of it.
It's a Milky Way of apps, of AI, of everything else. So the channels, those are the channels, and then every week there's a different one. I mean, you spoke about TikTok. You have to learn each one, and then there's a different one, and then the funny thing is, people trying to get a hold of you, and there's 7 or 8 platforms And you said, I think I saw a message, but which
I
platform
know
was that?
that happened to me and you. I went back into, I guess, Messenger or something like that. And I went back in like January. I don't know what happened. And I saw you trying to reach me. And I'm like, what? Oh my God. He must think I'm the most arrogant SOB ever. I didn't even have the courtesy to return your message. So I wrote you right away. I'm like, dude, I'm there for you. What do you need? No problem. Sorry.
Yeah. No, it's funny because now I have to say, I don't think I dreamt this, but I
Right.
think I saw a message from you. Correct
Right.
me if I'm wrong. And I
Right.
think it was on Facebook or whatever.
Hmm.
And wow. And I mean, and this whole AI, I mean, it just keeps you on your toes. But as you were saying, digitally exhausted, and that's what happens. That's what
Yeah.
happens. It's a lot.
It is. I got to tell you, I had a little preview, a very bizarre preview of AI recently because a friend, my neighbor, is actually one of these IT people who is very into interconnectivity between, manufacturing and sales and ordering and retail. And like, so he builds these whole big systems, right? Lovely guy, very smart dude. And he had finished a contract and he was just out exploring his options. So we were looking at his CV and he was telling me that he had been playing around with Chat GPT. And I said, well, why don't we throw your CV into Chat GPT and ask it to do a version in the Southern American, like Southern American, like, the South, in the parlance of the South, like something that would be, colloquial. And we stuck it in there and it came back like 3 seconds later. And it was not only perfect, pitch perfect, it just sounded like somebody down in Tennessee. And it was just
Yeah.
like unbelievable how fast that was. And it made me realize that, if you gave the same assignment to 10 comedy writers writing in a comedy room and said, okay, we're going to take this CV from an IT professional in Canada and make it sound like he's looking for a job in Tennessee, and it comes back in 3 seconds, that would take those 10 comedy writers a good, hour and a half of going back and forth to kind of punch
Yeah.
up a CV and get it to that place. So, boy, oh boy, you could see that in the creative fields, there are so many things that are going to just evaporate so quickly. No one's going to know what happened.
Oh yeah, and it's happening so fast. I mean, you said the right word. It's lightning speed and it's electricity speed. But I want to take you back a little bit. The group you have, Manteca, which is 9 pieces altogether or 10?
Yeah, it's 9 pieces. Sometimes we have a guest vocalist who sings with us, and we have two members of our crew who are like also members of the band. Those two guys, one of them's been with us for 34 years. The band's 44 years old this year. So
44.
it's, you know, I know it's crazy, isn't it?
Oh, hey, listen, I should talk. You remember repercussion?
Yes, of
It's
course.
almost 45.
There you go.
And
You have
speaking of
seniority, my
which,
brother.
I mean, we still play. I mean, we don't do 150 concerts a year like we used to, but every once in a while we'll do special projects. Or we did a concert just before COVID in Havana with the Havana Symphony, and which is a lot of fun. So we do these really special projects every
Oh,
once in a
that's
while
great.
because everybody's so busy now. But that takes me back as I remember you've had this band for so long, and we were touring in Canada, and we ran into each other
In
in
Winnipeg, I think, right?
Winnipeg.
Was it
And
Winnipeg?
yes, and
Yeah,
the hotel we were staying at after our concert, we came down and sat in with you guys
that's right. I remember that.
like
Very
yesterday.
specifically. Yeah, it was amazing. You were great. We were so excited to have you guys there with us.
That was so much fun. I mean, we had back around that same time we had a percussion ensemble called Concept Neuf, which came out of the McGill Percussion Ensemble when we were students there. And we had a really big hit album called The Path, and Ralph McDonald's The Path that he did with Steve Gadd and the Brecker Brothers. Well, we did a whole album of Chuck Mangione, Andre Gagnon, The Path, which was the big one, all in percussion. And Ralph actually gave us the music to do it, and it was amazing. So those 9 percussionists, and 2 of us in repercussion were in that group. But then we got so busy we had to leave that, and then the rest is history. But having a big group for that long, Matt, it's amazing. And you guys are still together.
Yeah, we just released our 14th album on September 15th last fall.
Wow.
And on this particular record, we really felt like we wanted to do a unique project. And, a lot of people in the sphere that we're in, they end up doing projects that don't really suit us. So in other words, they'll do Beatles album done for jazz or for instrumental, or they'll do the work of some other artist, Joni Mitchell, whatever. They'll do those things, and those are great projects. But for us, the biggest thrill with Manteca, other than playing live, is actually writing the material. So we don't want to subcontract that to anybody. You know what I mean? So we were in the context of that, wanting to write a new record and wanting to do music that was original. We thought about what we could do, and Colleen Allen, who is our saxophone player, and she said to me, why don't we do a project with the young ones who, like, there's a lot of up and coming musicians who are like just fantastic. She said, I just finished doing this festival and I saw this young clarinet player named Virginia McDonald. And she said, that's Kirk McDonald's daughter. And I was like, well, Kirk McDonald was our first saxophone player. He joined the band from Cape Breton when he was 19. And she said, yeah, I know, of course, because Colleen knows the history of the saxophone section of Manteca better than anyone. And basically, that led us to another idea of like, well, I wonder how many kids are in the band. Like, I wonder how many children from Manteca members, past and present, are actually musicians and composers. And
Wow.
what would it be like if we kind of explored that? So we started to look into it. We came up with 11 of them because some of the members had left and we'd never even met their kids. So we reached out to all, actually, it was 10 in the beginning. We reached out to all 10 kids, wrote them a letter, said, look, we're doing a record. We'd love you to play with us or write something for us, or we'd like to do one of your tunes that you have already, whatever suits you. And every one of them got back to us and said, absolutely. And then there was one kid who, our trumpet player, was the son of our trumpet player. And he was a trumpet player, his young son, but he wasn't professional yet. So we drew the line because we were going to be hoping to get federal funding for this. We drew the line at like the nepotism stops where they have to be professional. So as it turned out, the last week of the recording, this kid actually got a job and joined the union. And so he's soloing on the record too.
Nice.
He just made it under the wire, but it's wonderful. So the kids wrote about 6 of the 12 tunes on the record, and they all played with us. Two of them only wrote. They didn't. No, 3 of them wrote but didn't play with us. It was an amazing experience. It was just lovely. And we wrote them a whole briefing telling them, okay, everybody, this is who we think we are. These are our musical values. These are the values that we bring to in our composing and in our playing. You're free to observe those values and respect them, or you're free to just completely ignore them and do whatever you want. And they started sending material in, and we were just like extremely nervous in the beginning because can you imagine telling your kid, look, not feeling that song? I mean, that's not good. But so they all sent in material that we just loved and we found our way into, and it was an amazingly rich experience. We also did simultaneously, we did a streaming series. We shot these sessions in the studio.
Beautiful.
And so it's all recorded. It's wonderful. We're very fortunate to have had done that.
Wow, that's such a great idea. I mean, just the fact, I was saying that's just the fact that a 9-piece band is still together this day and age here, it is amazing. But you do that project. I mean, that's what makes, it's that kind of thing that's what gets you up in the morning, those kinds of things where you say,
gets you up very early in the morning because there is so much to do. I mean, we were in the studio. We had 42 tunes to learn in a week and 4 streaming shows with live audiences to do in a week. It was an godly amount of work and
Sure.
record the album at the same time, right? Because
Yes.
so it was insane. And we did like 3 days of pre-production. We did a lot of like pre-production in terms of flipping charts and demos around on the internet and stuff like that. So people were well prepared, but still, the amount of work it was, and the size of the team, because it was us nine plus our audio crew of two, plus the film crew of six, plus the guests. So there were any day there was like 25 or 30 people in the studio. And
Nice.
this was during COVID as well. So that was like unbelievably risky. We actually had to cancel one date because somebody got COVID, and the whole band, not the whole band, but most of the band fell ill. So that had to be canceled. Then that date had to be made up. So very complicated process. But anyway, yeah, we got up early. We got it done. We're extremely proud of both things, of the record and of the streaming series. So yeah, it's
Beautiful.
it's been a
I
year.
mean, and before moving to Montreal here, you were in Toronto for years, right? I mean, as long as I remember, you were in Toronto. I'd be in and out all the time, and who was speaking of you all the time? Alan Molnar, yes, a good friend, the vibe player,
Yeah,
Alan Molnar. He always asks me, "Have you been in touch with Matt?" And I told him recently that I said we finally connected, and you're going to be on the show because I see him all the time in New York. He's been in and out of our uh, projects, of the Costa projects that we do in Vermont. He came to the coast of Italy, and so we're in touch all the time. And I work with him in New York quite a bit. So he says hello, by the way.
nice. Make sure you get back to him for me.
I shall. But what brought you back to Montreal?
Well, my wife brought me back to Montreal. Actually, I came to Montreal in '75. I moved here from Prince Edward Island. My parents moved from New York to PEI when I was a teenager, and then once my career started, Robert Paquette, who was a wonderful, still is a wonderful artist, he signed me to do a tour with him. So I came to Montreal. I liked Montreal. I stayed in Montreal for about, I would say, probably a year and a half or so. And then there were a lot of opportunities in Toronto. So I moved to Toronto. And my wife was just like, you know what? Toronto is so boring. We can't stay here. We have to move back to Montreal. And at the time, Manteca was touring kind of internationally at that point in time. So it didn't really matter that much where I lived. So I was kind of reluctant, but I did. I moved back to Montreal, and in '89, and I've stayed here ever since. I do a lot of work still in Toronto. I had an apartment there for a while. I don't have that anymore, but so I go back and forth quite frequently, and I like the kind of the bi-city type of thing. It really works for me. You know, I go to Toronto, I get a lot done. I have a lot of friends there. We go out, we have a good time, and I come back to Montreal and I can get focused back on the work and get some stuff done. And you know, it's been great. It's also been great for me to learn how to speak French, and to be part of the Quebec community, because uh, I mean, I think Quebecers do things in the arts very, very differently than they do in Ontario and in the rest of Canada. And I'm really, really happy to have studied under some of the masters here, and to be able to leave my house and walk for 10 minutes and see a piece by Robert Lepage or by Sept Doigts de
Yes.
la Main. I mean, just like within walking distance of my house, there's days when I think to myself, people used to say, oh, it was great to live in Mozart's time, or it was great to live in Shakespeare's time, or whatever. I feel like it's an honor to live in the time of Sept Doigts de la Main and Robert Lepage.
Oh,
You know,
he was
uh,
genius. He's genius, this guy.
these are geniuses.
Yes.
I actually met Robert Lepage at a train station once, and it was like 6 in the morning or 7 in the morning. I saw him sitting there, and I went up to him and I said, est-ce que c'est très tôt le matin pour dire que vous êtes une génie? And his smile, big smile.
Nice, nice. No, I mean,
Anyways, yeah.
yeah,
So I learned so much in Montreal. I've learned so much in Quebec. I'm so grateful for the passion that people put into the arts here. And people are passionate about the arts in Toronto too, but it's just a different culture. And
yeah,
it's a different culture, I think, founded in, um, and you've toured all over the world, so you know this on a totally similar level, but it it's like I think Quebecers have this generational thing whereby, this little island, this little French-speaking island here, they were competing with the big shows from France, the big shows from America. Their own culture could not survive if they didn't tell audiences, we're just as good as everybody else.
Yeah.
But we have a quarter of the budgets or a 16th of the budgets, or, but yet they did it, and they made it so incredibly that the culture of creation in Quebec, it's where, they're international leaders. Cirque du Soleil, the Moment Factory, and the whole history behind projection
Sure.
that happened here in Quebec with people like Normal and all these guys who kind of discovered this new medium and built it. So it's wonderful being here. I love being in Quebec.
Yeah, I mean, you're right about the whole creative process, because here it's like you can't be the same as somebody else because you're forgotten very quickly, and there's also you want to be different, you want to be creative, and so there's this kind of this it's like two cities in one, that they're two different things going on all the time, and you can interact, you can go all over the place. People are facing one way or the other, and there's not one, like, getting back to the channels. There's so many different channels and different histories. I mean, for example, I tell people that Montreal is like the North American Europe, of course, European city. Not just that, but everything that happened here. It's a mix of all the things that's great in New York, all the things that's great in Paris, all the things that are great in Madrid, and they're here, and they've had to not fight for it, but they've had to really take their place and work hard. But the nice thing is, it's supported. That creativity is expected. You got to be different,
Mhm. Yes,
and
very
that
much so.
history is there. Like Saul Goodman, like the timpanist for the New York Philharmonic, used to teach here. So you had all of those people like Louis Charbonneau, Pierre Belus, came down from that channel, plus the Delecluse School of Classical Percussion. Plus you had all this French rock stuff, and all the world music was totally like accepted much faster here than elsewhere. You don't have this resistance first like you have in most cities. Like, it's
Mhm.
right away. What is that?
Mhm,
And let's do
exactly.
it. Yeah. And that's a wonderful, and you have this kind of creative tension all the time,
Mhm.
which is nice. And I grew up in Ottawa, so when I came to Montreal, I mean, I had no intention of staying here. I just wanted to study. My idea was to go to New York and LA. I wanted to be the studio guy, and that's where I was going. Except I never ended up leaving. Um, with the group going, starting the tour and all of that stuff. But it was nice for me because I learned French very quickly. I speak four languages now, fluently, and I got into the francophone thing right away, and the anglophone was easy. So you're stepping in different worlds all the time, and it's amazing. And this so totally different, right? I mean,
Yeah. I speak one and a half languages fluently.
yeah, but I really work at it. No,
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
just kidding.
I wish I could say the same.
But you speak music. That's universal.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
But I have another thing I'd like you to talk about. I mean, what I was always impressed with you is you're not just a percussionist. We talked earlier about the percussionist mind, who just, and especially those of us who are entrepreneurial and are always curious, and you're expanding that. I mean, you got into production. I mean, record production. I mean, you worked with people like Daniel Lanois, Leonard Cohen, like as a performer or producer in TV. Because now, I mean, we're expanding here. We're going beyond the performer, player, and record uh, studio guy. What took you there?
I like telling stories, and I've started telling stories on radio, and then Denise Donlin, who was the senior executive at Much Music in Toronto, was very influential on my career, and she had interviewed me as a percussionist on a number of occasions and had seen Manteca, and she said, "Look, I'd like you to start doing some stories for us." So I started doing some stuff for Much Music, and I loved the intersection of picture and narration and music and sound design and writing and interviewing, and I loved the intersection of all those things. It just felt like such a great toolbox to be playing in, and I just enjoyed it so much. And so that's kind of where I got started there. And then on the production side, as a percussionist, and I'm sure you've gone through a similar experience, we'd go into sessions and they would not be well organized, and they would not be, you'd be like, why is this taking so long? And why is nobody rehearsed? And why is, like, what is going on here? How did this pile of crap ended up being a session? I mean, if that's what being a producer is, I can do that. You know what I mean? I can do that better. And then I would do good sessions, and then you'd learn all this stuff from these big producers from, Canada and from the US and from LA and from, wherever. And you'd be like, oh, they know what they're doing. And so you'd study with these people, and men and women. I mean, I did some amazing records that were produced by women. And so you learn from these people. And so that's how I became a producer, and I really enjoy doing that as well. The word entrepreneurial that you use is a very important word, because a lot of times, uh, people credit, they say, entrepreneurial artist, and it's almost an insult in a way. It's almost like,
Yeah.
oh, if you're entrepreneurial, you're not a true artist. I mean, to be a true artist, you have to be, out of your mind. You know what I mean? You're not organized enough to keep track of business affairs. You're an artist. Well, I don't subscribe to that, but I think my entrepreneurial thing is I don't like doing business. I can't stand doing business. I'm bored to death of doing business. I don't do business to do business. I do business to make art. That's the only reason.
Well
That's the
said. Thank
only
you.
reason
Thank you, Matt.
I'm sitting
That's
in
it.
front of an Excel spreadsheet. That's not fun. I don't enjoy that. I'm doing that so I can get a project made, so I can get something crafted, so I can get something built. Because if I don't do it, nobody else is going to do it, right?
Yeah.
So, and people go, oh, you're such a good businessman. I'm not a good businessman. I'm a horrible businessman because I'm making art. I'm sitting around, I'm doing things that I think are kind of like to the left of center. I'm not aiming for the center. I'm not making hit records. I'm producing a record with an artist, and I'm probably doing them a disservice. Yeah, I love your idea. That's whacked. That's crazy. Let's do that. And then, of course, they don't have a hit single because it's not hit single material, and the record doesn't do what it should do, but they're gratified as an artist. You know what I mean?
Sure. Absolutely.
The records I've produced, I think the artists that I've produced them with are pretty proud of them. And some of them have done okay on radio and sold well and whatever. But for the most part, I'm being an entrepreneur only to make work. And I don't mean work. I mean artwork,
You said it well. I mean, I think this is one of the best ways that I've heard it said, because I've always struggled with that idea, because I would come in and say, Aldo, you're such a businessman. And exactly like you, I'm not a businessman. If I wanted to be a businessman, which I ran away from as the pure business model that we know, people who are in business to do business, to make money only. Not that money is not important, but for me, that's a tool. Money is a tool, like you have like drumsticks. You know, this is a tool,
yeah.
and you need those tools, and those cost. So you have to take care of that. You have to take care of food and all of that. But the business of creating something, and here's a funny thing. I won't mention names, but on these people who are really well known about making it in life, and it's always about bottom line and numbers. And the discussion is always about how much money can you make in a week, and of course you have to take care of that. To me, that's obvious. But what's less obvious is creating something that's worthwhile. that's long lasting, that is meaningful, like a Picasso or the Beatles, or something that lasts a long time. And um, the obsession these days with people, and you see it online. You want to make a $10 million a week. Well, this is how. And and then I heard one recently, which I've always struggled with this idea of getting back to the making records that are going to be hits, and you have to have that little um, idea that is going to hit the most common denominator, that the most number of people will buy in. Therefore, it's a hit. Then it's art. Well, that's one way of doing things, but that's
Hmm.
not the only thing. The other thing is exactly what you said: making something that you value, that will remain, and you're happy about, and life goes on, and the life is a better place now that that's created. That's where I'm
Hmm.
at. But I
Hmm.
look at this, and especially now when you have that discussion about people buying football teams, baseball teams, and this obsession of the sports world just going bananas, and it's everything is superlatives, and it's all about just ownership, and paying somebody $16 million to play a thing. To me, it's crazy that you put that much energy into one person and that pressure. And what about all those? How many people do you have to put in those seats? That could be something interesting if you educate them also another way. So
Hmm.
why does
Hmm.
this paradigm have to be about part ownership, and then you sell the TV rights in this place, because then you make $20 billion, now that's worth this, and it's not about culture, art, and well-being anymore. It's
Well, I
about
think that the lowest common denominator thing is definitely something that as musicians we've experienced time and time again. And it's always so wonderful when I hear a song on the radio that is a great pop song that is left of center, that has somehow made it through the gatekeepers to become a hit record. Then it's also a good piece of music, as opposed to the bland pablum that seems to be, generally speaking, what contemporary music is. So I have great respect for people who can do that, and I think that's a winning combination, and that's something that we all look towards and say, look, you did make art and commerce at the same time. It is possible to do that, but it's becoming less and less possible because the gatekeepers are now more and more secretive. It's like how you get on a playlist at Spotify. I know that people study that now. That's become kind of like there are Spotify scholars now, if you can believe it. But ultimately, the work, like I believe that one of the things that Manteca has succeeded at is that we're presenting instrumental jazz world. We call it jazz adjacent, but
jazz
it's
adjacent.
it is not smooth jazz, but it is melodic jazz. It is groovy jazz. It is jazz that has a very pronounced groove and orchestration and all of those things. And yet the melodies are, for the most part, memorable, but they don't suck. That's what we say. The melodies are memorable, but they don't suck. And we're proud of that because that's a hard place to be. You
Yeah,
know what I mean? That's
yeah,
that's a place where hopefully people will respect what we do as being accessible to the public, but also being thoughtful and profound.
yeah. No, and I think that's important. And once you take on that responsibility, which obviously you had, and you did that from the beginning. I mean, when I saw you guys play the first time, I said, "Oh, I mean, amazing. They're different. Manteca is Manteca. End of story." And it's beautiful. And I had this discussion with, I mean, the guys in repercussion always felt the same way. We walked away from major record deals just because, the the record company would say, well, our question would be, who gets the last word of,
Right.
sign off, artistic, and of course, well, we do. Well, we never got past that, so we walked away from, some major early on, and we said, we can't do that. We put in too much. We want to not just educate. We want to show, and we want a vehicle of our own where we can explore all these ideas, and that's worth gold. There's no price. That is really
Yeah.
priceless. And to
Because you have a
have,
legacy now that you could go back and listen to and feel good about. And you have a legacy of work that you feel like, yeah, maybe I wouldn't do the same thing today, but I'm not embarrassed by what I did.
yeah,
You know,
yeah. Oh yeah,
we
and
story. Lynn Trombley, who's my partner, she is a singer, and she sometimes will sing a couple pieces with us with Manteca. And basically, what she's doing is she's adding to the melody. So it's not like it's a pop song or anything that we're doing. But when I introduce her, I always tell the story of like, when Manteca used to get signed by a record company, they used to always come in and go, they come and see a show, and it was like a rock show, except it wasn't rock. It was like jazz, and it was like full of energy and, all the production values of a rock show. And they'd be like, wow, that's so exciting. And there's so much energy because 9 people on stage, a horn section, 3 drummers. I mean, that's going to put out some impact, and they'd be like, yeah, we're going to sign this. And then they sign us, and then we do a record, and it wouldn't become a pop hit. And then they'd say, hey, come on in. We want to talk to you about the next record. And we had this idea, it'd be great if you guys got a singer. And we're like, no. Then
yes,
they drop us and we get signed, and the same thing would happen. And now we're our own record company. And we thought, you know what, guys, it'd be great if we got a singer.
that's funny.
But like I said, it's not pop. It's just
Yeah, but
singing the
you're
melodies.
doing this. You're doing this on your terms, which it's important for you to feel good about it, right? So if it has huge commercial success, that's great. But it has your own success and what you said, the legacy part. I had this conversation with my very good friend who passed, Neil Peart, for years and years ago, about how I said I respect you guys because you started this trio that was like I mean, the guys were like nobody wanted to listen to you guys, but you stuck to it. And he said, no, absolutely. The 3 of us were so determined. We walked away from a lot of stuff. We ate a lot of peanut butter. But we were determined. And I said, I really respect that. And he said the same thing. He says, you guys are doing the same. You're not doing something that's another hamburger. You're doing it on your own terms. That's important. The commercial side of it, the added value of making $20 million on something. Well, that's if it works, great. If not, you still have that same satisfaction, artistic satisfaction for sure. And then you can laugh about it. You can have fun with it. And at one point, Neil and I said to him, "Let's put on this concert that I was asked to do about Canadian drummers, and I was working on it." And he came out to see us. Actually, we were playing in Toronto. He came out and he says, I have a better idea. Let's do an album. We never did the
Oh,
album.
nice.
I said, I never thought of that. I was thinking about what you do is so out there and what we do is so out there. And this would be so not obvious. Repercussion with Neil Peart. Can you imagine?
Yeah,
I
Neil.
heard, I saw it. At first he didn't. And then when he saw us perform, he says, no, I totally get what you mean. And he was totally into it. Of course, yeah, he had lost his wife and daughter at the time, just right after. So that kind of withered.
Yeah. Well, Neil, I had the opportunity to do some work with him as well. And he's a good example of somebody that we were speaking about at the top of the conversation today, because he was a writer. Uh,
Yep.
he was a very influential member of the community. He was accessible to people. His body of work is much larger than Rush. And you know, that man lived through so much
Oh,
tragedy, like unbelievable,
you could say that again, unbelievable. But
yeah.
what a creative mind! I mean, he created that that being, that type
Hmm.
of person, and
Hmm.
be
Hmm.
so intelligent, and you could have
Yeah,
conversations. Well,
I was very grateful to him on a number of occasions. Yeah, for sure.
we had him down at COSA in Vermont one year because I'd always write him out and say, Neil, what do you think? And it would never work out. But one time he had a house up here in the Laurentians, and he said, "Your timing is perfect, Aldo. Let's do it." So he came down under a fictitious name, and I couldn't tell anybody. I promised him. I said, "You'll be a total surprise." And I thought we would just talk, and then he called me. He says, "Aldo, no, let's play." so so we did. We talked.
What
We
did he want
played.
to play? What was his like go-to groove? Like just groove?
No. We said we'll just improvise.
Okay.
Okay, which was a big thing for him. And then so I said, there there are four guys who were at the Cosa at the time. Well, there was Memo Acevedo, there was Marcus Santos, who I asked, and Michael Wimberly. So I said I put together like an African djembe thing, and I rehearsed. I said I can't tell you who it is, but we might do this. And then we did a Brazilian thing. We might do this, and we set up a drum set. So we might go on and off. So I got together with Neil and we ran across some. I showed him a few things on djembe, and I said, before everybody comes in, you can choose, and we can lead each other. Totally improvised, like a conversation.
Hmm.
And then he says, "Okay, well, if you feel like going to the drum set, you can." And instead, you go to the djembe, and so we'll just mess ourselves up, mess everybody up, and get everybody thinking, and have fun
Right.
with it.
That's
And it was
awesome.
like
Yeah.
that. So wherever we took it, I said the only thing is, I said, if we do this, here's the call, the cue in and out, and that's all we spoke about. It's
Right, right, right.
beautiful. We filmed it, by the way. One day
Oh
I'm going to
no,
release it.
that's awesome.
But it was so nice, man, and just the interaction, and he was so happy. And I mean, just the energy of creating something
Hmm.
on the spot, like you're the percussionist. Yeah, yeah, it was beautiful. I wanted to ask you about the Songwriting Hall of Fame. You're involved with that?
Yeah, I was the artistic director of their 2017 gala at Massey Hall, which inducted Beau Damage, Stefan Venn, Neil Young, and Bruce Coburn. And it was a beautiful project, extremely complicated. Their budget was very small. And the demands of having that roster of talent to honor was substantial. And it's a very unique organization because there are not many organizations in our country that are French and English. And so that one operates in those two spheres. And there are a lot of challenges in that world because, if you're honoring four incredible writers, as we were doing that year, two of whom are from Quebec, and being honored in Toronto, where a Massey Hall of 2,700 people will be inhabited by probably 2,500 Anglophones and 200
Yes.
Francophones. And you have to make sure that the Anglophones understand who those artists are and how important this is. Those are challenges, right? Those are challenges to make sure that
Yes.
the level of respect for the Francophone artists is equally distributed with the Anglophone artists. And it was very, very successful. I mean, I had Beau Damage over to the loft here in Montreal for lunch. We had that kind of bond. Stefan Venn came over here to be interviewed, and many martinis later, he started singing during his interview. You can see
Nice.
all these things on my YouTube page, Matt Zimbel YouTube. And beautiful opportunity to connect with the Francophone artists. And one of the things that we did was I didn't want the Francophone artists to end up in Toronto and be like having that Anglophone experience, right? So I said, we are going to have two music directors, a French music director and an English music director. And so Eric West-Millette, who I've worked with substantially down here in Montreal, became the bass player and the music director, Côté Francophone. And Doug Wild, who's my partner in Manteca, became the Anglophone English music director. But they didn't stay ghettoized like that. So Doug would do some of the Francophone acts and Eric would do some of the Anglophone acts. I just wanted to make sure that the band was bilingual, that the spirit of that band, that people would get to Toronto at Massey and they would be surrounded by people that they knew from their own culture. The stage managers were bilingual. the talent wranglers were bilingual. The whole experience was like, come to Toronto, you're going to have an amazing experience, and they did, and that was an incredible experience. We had such a great time, um, and I really feel like, in terms of bilingual creation, we really crossed a few lines. We really, like we had simultaneous, with the projections, we had some simultaneous translation of lyrics so the Torontonians could find their way in.
Right. Yeah.
If you go onto
Beautiful.
the YouTube page and go to the Beau Dommage video pack that inducted them, you'll see how we weave in between the English and French. I co-wrote that with Lynn Tremblay, who was the voiceover person who did it, and she co-wrote the piece with me. And she's a francophone, so it went into these really beautiful kind of uh, playing with the francophone culture, and sometimes in English and sometimes in French. It was really beautiful. So that was a great opportunity. I really enjoyed doing that. Those
Yeah.
those type of things don't happen very often.
Yeah. Especially with those names. I mean, most non-francophones would not even know the name. I worked a lot with Stefan Van, by the way. A lot
Oh,
of the
did you?
sessions. Yeah. He's because it was funny because at one point the orchestra that I worked with, the TV orchestra, we would rehearse in a recording studio. So once a week, we were there rehearsing for other materials, records we were doing. Other people would hire us for film work. So it was like we were a house orchestra for CBC, 19 musicians, but we would rehearse in a studio. And then once the word got out, people would say, "Hey, since you guys are all there, I'm going to
Right.
send you." So Stefan would come in and we'd do a jingle for him, and then we go on to some film music, or or something. And Stefan is great. And
Oh, he's amazing. He's
oh
like, and his material, like, honest to God, when I got the assignment to do the artistic directorship of that show, I'm embarrassed to say I didn't know who Stefan Van was. And I was like,
yeah,
oh my God, the writers are doing this again. Why, how are they going to sell tickets if they've got somebody there that nobody knows? And then I started getting into the body of his work, and I was just like,
yeah,
man, this is amazing stuff. And then I had to go out and sell it to artists who were going to cover it. And they were like, oh, I would love to do that. And like, you know what I mean? It was
sure,
just so thrilling. And then to work on the tunes.
yeah.
They're great pop tunes, like great pop
Oh,
tunes, right?
he's
We had
brilliant.
so much fun working with his material.
Yeah,
And he's
and
such
he
an articulate guy. Like he gave if you go on the YouTube page, it's like, I think it's 2 minutes, his piece. His capsule's probably 2 minutes. It is a course in songwriting. It is a
okay.
course in songwriting.
No, he was a brilliant mind, and so I mean, unassuming. I mean, even there, I mean, most people here don't know him still, but he's the guy
Yeah,
behind all of that body of work. Right? It's
yeah, yeah,
amazing. But
yeah.
to work with guys like that, it's amazing. And then Beau Dommage. I mean, what a lot of people outside this province don't know that they were probably one of the top one of the top or like world music French Canadian groups. It's so creative. You
Well,
listen
one of
to
the
the
things
music.
that was said in the capsule that we did on them was that they actually got signed in Toronto. Half the label thought they had signed a folk act. The other thought they had signed a prog rock act.
That's funny because
So
there was a clarinet player. I mean that's like there was
yeah, they
all
were
kinds.
definitely leaders at their time. And I was very, very pleased because I've never seen this done before. And I'm just going to boast for 1 second here. So stand by as the boast
Oh,
comes through.
please,
And
please.
that is that when Michelle um, uh, from Beau Dommage got up on stage to accept the award, he said how much he enjoyed the pack. I've never seen an artist accept an award and compliment the pack.
The
You
pack.
know,
Yeah.
it was amazing.
Well, I'm so happy to hear. I mean, that kind of thing when that happens, and people learn about each other and learn and give space to those great things that have been done. I remember when I first, like I said, when I first moved here, and I started working with people here, and I'd go back to Ottawa to visit my family, and my friends would say, "So, what are you doing?" Well, I'm touring with Andre Gagnon. they'd say who, or I'd say I just did a record with Celine Dion. This young singer had no idea what you're talking about. You could be
Right.
talking
Yeah, I know.
about
I know.
before she went English, right?
Yeah, I know.
And here, everybody's, Rene Simard. I was doing some concerts with Rene Simard. Never heard of him, and this is across the river, like it's 2 hours away.
Exactly, exactly. Well, I did Canada Day as artistic director in 2001, in 2005, and in 2011, and also in 2004, but not in Ottawa. But so I had a lot of experience at the bilingual beast, as it was, and
Nice.
also, the big challenge with Canada Day is to portray a country that I love very, very deeply, uh, in a manner that is dignified and not saccharine pop Tim Hortons. Do you know what I always call it? That, you know what I mean? I think there is a depth here in our country, and that's when I'm in charge of Canada Day. That's what I want to celebrate. Is that, you know
Beautiful.
the values that we have as a nation. And it's hard. It's a hard gig to do because you have to convince a lot of people as to why you're doing certain things and why they're being done in that certain way and why this act is going on and not that act. And you know what I mean? It's like, woof, it's a big one.
Complicated. I know. I did it once, and it was um, I called it Canadian Heartbeat, and repercussion as the bass. We had all these other artists representing all the diverse cultures playing on their own, and then we did this one humongous piece in the end that I had rehearsed with each one of them. So I went everywhere
Mhm.
rehearsing and preparing everybody. And yeah, I know what you mean. And I don't wear a hat, but I'm going to take it off for you, man, to be able to do that so many times successfully. And I know you have, your artistry has always been in the right place, but just to insist that we continue to do that, and you continue. I mean, that's good. I mean, that feels really good that we're not alone, right?
Yeah, yeah, for sure, for sure. And the thing about that too is that you go into that type of thing. I did it. Doug Wild and I were music directors on the show, and I think it was '93 and '94. So I was inside the production for a little bit, and then in 2001, I applied with Peter Heyman to become artistic director, and we were successful at getting the evening show. And so you get into you start to understand how that beast works because we came in as musicians, you know what I mean? And you're exposed to the whole thing. It's a really complicated gig, especially because of the weather and the budgets and all of those things. But one of the things that I'm very proud of is that we really reinvented the way it was done in 2011. We really changed the whole thing. Just to give you one idea, one of the things that we did that I was extremely proud of is that we had offsite rehearsals 2 weeks before in Montreal. So, in other words, I put together Sept Doigts de la Main and these groups from across the country, and we rehearsed this number, and we did all kinds of stuff that had never been done before. My partner Lynn Tremblay taught this string quartet Orphée, how to dance, and so they came out on stage and they actually danced as
Nice.
a string quartet, and we did all of this offsite. And I insisted that the team, the technical team, be the same team that was going to go to the Hill. So Solotech brought in their team, and it was the same team. So by the time we got to Ottawa, it was like a small community. It was like we had
Right.
already toured together because we'd been eating together and working together for 3 days in Montreal. And that bond, I'm really into that community thing. A lot of stuff gets done in my world at the dinner table or at the lunch table or in the green room.
Right.
There's a lot of bonds made there, and that hospitality, it doesn't have to be elaborate, but it has to be good. There has to be moments where people feel valued as artists, and that's how you build communities. So we had this whole big team, that kind of went to Ottawa, and then at the end of the thing, we kind of threw in some rock stars because you need to throw in your rock stars, and your rock stars from both French and English get thrown in, and they're like come backstage, and there's this whole community of people from across the country that already know each other, that have been together, and they land in this field full of happiness and joy. And it really it infected the show with this kind of yes, we can attitude, because it was an impossibly difficult show to do.
Yeah.
One of the things that we did in 2011 was like, I was like so sick and tired of seeing, uh, an artist go on stage with a house band, even though I had been the house band, I just felt like, no, let's not do that. Let's have bands. Like, let's have bands, because that's what's happening in our culture, bands.
Sure.
And so we put together, and let's plug and play with those bands. If you can play with this person, you can play with that person. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
we kind of deconstructed the house band. And then we had this circular revolving stage, and then we would set one band up on one side of the stage and one band up on the other side, so that it would just spin around. Well, it was a very complicated venture, and then they threw in a princess and a prince right at the last minute, and so it was the first time that Catherine and Will came by to say hello to Canada. So there was all that,
Oh,
all of a
yes.
sudden I'm working for Buckingham Palace. That wasn't
Of
in my
course.
contract. But it was lovely. It was so much fun. And then, of course, everybody thinks they could do a better job at programming Canada Day. Everybody who writes to the Ottawa Citizen goes, why wasn't Celine there? Celine should have been there. Guys, get real. Celine
Some
wasn't there because your tax dollars were paying for it. Okay, how's that feel?
No, but also it's nice to have other people make room for other people to be there. I mean, someone like Celine is like saying, okay, why isn't Taylor Swift there? Sometimes they may not be available, or it might be too much, or just it's good not to have the person there, to leave room for someone else. Uh,
Well, in 2001, the first year we did it, I convinced Alanis Morissette to do it. She had never done a free show in Canada, number one. Number two, she had never done. She was going to premiere a new song and play an old song. She's going to do two songs. I had to convince her to come up here and lose money to do the show, because she was en route to Finland or to Sweden or something like that. And I just begged her. I was like, could you just stop? Like, just stop in Ottawa, do the show. I'll get you on your way. And then and she did. And she lost money on it. And she was so great. And then on the French side, I brought Jean Leloup in. Well, Jean
wow.
Leloup playing Canada Day, that's as big a
Yes,
thing as having Alanis Morissette in the nation's capital.
of
You
course.
know what I mean?
He's
But
great.
those
Yeah.
things were like, you have to beg to get that. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
But
Anyway,
Alanis, wasn't Alanis from around Ottawa?
yeah. Well, that's why she did the show, because as a little girl growing up, the show on the hill had always been, a mythical thing.
Sure.
And then she gets on the show. We offer her the show, and she's like, "Yeah, I will do that." But no one had ever asked her before,
Wow. It's amazing. I mean,
and she knocked it out of the park. And of course, she came up here, and in one of her songs, she had a very, very bad word.
don't
CBC's
say
like,
it. Don't
what are we
say
supposed to do with that? I said, well, that's your problem. You figure it out.
it. Nice. I mean, it's. I was going to say it's so nice. I mean, your path. I mean, your journey in this whole thing, as you're growing and continuing to navigate in all these great ideas, and to be able to do it, it's like uh, missing some of those hard balls is coming your way, and surviving some of those.
Oh, yeah.
And that's fantastic to hear. And what impresses me, because I've known you for a long time, in those different um, positions, or in your different lives, to know that you're back here and you're still continuing to do great things, which is, to me, I feel so good when I see that. I said, "Look, didn't give up yet. Beautiful,
I didn't
beautiful."
give up yet.
No,
They've
because
beaten him,
sometimes
but he's still around.
no, sometimes you get, tired, or worn out, or all of these things. But no, we take the challenge for as long as we can. But it's a mental attitude. It's a mental state that we develop. And I mean, I know what it's like. 'Cause some days you say no, and then another day you say no. That's not going to stop. I got it now. I have another idea.
Mhm. Well, what I've been doing lately is I've been feeling I feel very young. I still feel very young, but I am an elder. And I've been adopting my elder position a little bit more. And I've been writing a podcast called Yes, We Canada, The Progressive's Guide to Getting the Beep Out. And it's kind of like, it's about Canada, but it's kind of aimed at American progressives who are going to move back to Canada when Trump gets elected again. And so it's in that spirit. And so I have so much fun doing that. That's kind of like what I've been really enjoying, is mouthing off about politics and social events, and doing it in a humorous manner, because I think we all need to laugh more
Oh,
now than ever.
oh yes, yes. I mean, laughing has always been good, and sometimes I go to shows where people are supposed to be funny and they're not that funny, and I would s- and I
We've
would
all seen that
say,
as musicians.
yeah, yeah. I mean, when we grew up, I mean, so much stuff that was really funny. I mean, really funny on the
Well, I
TV.
remember we were doing TV shows, and we used to go into the writer's room after the script was locked, and we used to go through the garbage. This was like one of our weekly rituals. I'm sure you've probably done this too. We'd go through the garbage. This was when stuff was still being printed out, like on paper. That shows you how old I am. And we would go and look for the funny jokes that the network wouldn't approve, because those were
Wow.
the funniest jokes. Those were the ones in the garbage.
Yes. Oh no, and I mean it's such good therapy. I remember that reminds me of, I mean, I have a sense of a real sense of humor, and when I get going, it just when it's really funny. I mean, often it's just not funny. The canned laughter, just doesn't do it. I remember once I went to see, remember Blazing Saddles when that came
Oh
out?
my God, yes, of course.
So I laughed so much that the manager of the theater came to me and he said, "I'm sorry, sir. I'm going to give you a ticket to come back another time because nobody can hear anything. Would you mind?" And I said, "Oh, I'm so sorry. It's just so funny that okay, I'll come back. I get it. I get it. Every scene, don't move or
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
the,
Well, I do on the podcast, the character God. I have the character God on the podcast, not every time, but like he's made three appearances, and God's a Democrat, obviously, and but he's done it in the spirit of Mel Brooks, like the 2,000-year-old man. So God is always talking like this. He's a very old fella, and he's not too happy with how things are going in the United States right now with the
right.
Republican Party. So, and God says, the interviewer says to God, he says, "Sir, you sound a lot like Bernie Sanders." He goes, "No, Bernie Sanders sounds a lot like God. Keep that straight."
I just, and that's funny. But I remember getting back to that movie when they're riding across the desert, or where was it, in Montana, whatever that was,
Montana or
and
something.
you've
Yeah.
got the Count Basie band.
Yes, that was so funny. I saw the film recently. Yeah, exactly. Because I was showing it to somebody who had yet to experience the brilliance of Mel Brooks.
Oh, Mel Brooks, that was funny. That's funny. Anyway, well, listen. I mean, we can go on for days. What would you suggest to somebody to stay creative? What would be your words of wisdom to people who? I mean, they listen to us. I mean, we've had so much fun, and it's far from over as far as I'm concerned, and I know it's far from over for you too, as I see. But I mean, people coming up now. I mean, we may have a look because we have all this history to compare it to, but somebody coming up doesn't have that history. What would you tell them?
Well, I think you have to find your voice. And finding your voice as an artist takes a long time, and your voice changes. And, you have to be open to finding your voice. And your voice will guide you in so many ways that are so profound. And you have to let your voice and your spirit be open to discovering what that is. So, just to give you an example, like when I'm writing my podcast, I get up very, very early, 5:30 in the morning sometimes. I come down to the quiet of the house, and I make a coffee, and I sit in front of the computer, and I have an idea as to where I'm going. But I stay open to, as the research pushes me in different directions, I stay open to it. And I've learned through time, in the first few times that happened, I was like, oh, okay, well, stay focused, stay focused, stay focused. CBC used to teach you that. A story has to be focused. You know what I mean? But then you'd realize, no, wandering around, looking, exploring, researching, letting the research take you places. There's humor in there. There's ideas in there. There's a voice in there. And so I start to discover, we're on the third season of the podcast now. Episode 40 is being recorded as soon as I get off this call. That is going to be, accepting how that voice is developing over this 3-year period. So as an artist, you're going to develop your voice. It's not going to come to you instantly. You have to be patient. You have to do your work. You have to, find your best methodology of working. But you need to be both disciplined and compassionate towards yourself. You can't beat yourself up. Oh, I should be better. Oh, I should be working harder. Oh, go in the frame that you can go in. Take your time, explore, be kind to yourself. Those things are all important. Ask yourself what you did right, not what you did wrong.
Brilliant.
There's
Brilliant.
lots of people who will tell you what you did wrong, but there's not a lot of people who will tell you what you did right. And
Yeah.
and so, yeah, that's what I would say.
Yeah, very good words of wisdom. I thank you for that. And it's true. I mean, people will tell you more about people will remember more the negatives than the positives. The positives are almost taken for granted. Like that's good, then that's the way it should be. But this was not. Yeah. So you're right. And keeping on your track and never giving up. Right.
I got to say too, Aldo, that I've noticed in the generation of YouTube, uh, you know, elders learn different than youngers, right? So if you're 8 years old and you're learning how to play bass on YouTube, that's a good thing. Like you don't have to go grocery shopping, you don't have to clean the house, you don't have to go. Your responsibilities are pretty minimal when you're 8. And I have seen some 8-year-olds play bass on YouTube that is just like incredible. So
Right.
there's a whole different pattern of learning, that you have at that age, and your mind is able to absorb things. There's a whole level of musicianship that is YouTube musicianship now. That it's very, very impressive. It's intimidating, and I notice with a lot of younger musicians that if they're not at that level, they're intimidated because they're not the greatest. You know what I mean? They see these videos of young kids on, and they're playing at this level that they're not at yet, and they give up because they're like, I'll never be that good, and that kid's 8, and I'm never going to be as good as she is. And that's not good. That's not good. I've seen a lot of young people are beating themselves up, and they're not getting the work done because they're spending too much time beating themselves up about not being the greatest. So
Yeah.
you have to be careful about that.
Yeah.
You have to be
And
very
and
careful
there's
about it.
and also just to add to that, there's room for everybody on this planet. I mean, no matter how many billions we are, there's room for
Mhm,
everybody. And then you
mhm.
make your space, you make your roadway and
That's right.
your path, basically, right?
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
Well, thank you so much, Matt. I mean, it's really a pleasure to catch up with you. And we can go on for days, but I know you're a busy man, but we'll continue. And I want to really seriously thank you for taking the time
Oh, I really
to be with
appreciate it,
us.
Aldo. It was such a pleasure to see you again, and I'm so sorry it took me 3 months to get back to you.
Hey, we're patient and all good things will come. Yeah. Well, as I always say, to be continued.